Hello and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news in bite-sized episodes every single week, unless I am sick with strep throat and can't speak for very long. Thankfully, I'm feeling a lot better now, and I am ready to talk about Pwn2Own Automotive. Pwn2Own is an annual hacking contest that challenges participants to find vulnerabilities in widely used products for cash prizes, with the automotive section of the contest focusing on vulnerabilities that exist in vehicles. Modern cars are giant 2-ton computers with a lot of capabilities, and as cars become smarter and extend more capabilities to drivers, they also open up new avenues for exploitation. Pwn2Own Automotive is a newer contest starting just last year in January of 2024, and it takes place at the Automotive World Conference in Tokyo. This year it started on January 22nd, 2025, and ended on the 24th, just this weekend. So what did 2025 bring us? Here's the highlights. 49 total zero-day vulnerabilities were discovered by participants and nearly $900,000 awarded to different hacking groups. What was really interesting to me was not necessarily the exploits discovered against vehicles, though I do always find those interesting, but the way people managed to exploit electric car vehicle chargers. Tesla chargers were hacked twice, but they were far from the only ones, as 23 zero-day vulnerabilities were discovered in Wolfbox, ChargePoint HomeFlex, Autel Maxi Charger, Phoenix Contact ChargeX, Emporia EV chargers. I wish I could share with you more details on how these attacks were performed, because I'm sure it's really interesting. However, vendors have 90 days to develop and release security fixes before the zero-day vulnerabilities are publicly disclosed. I think this is pretty fair. You probably don't want information about how to hack electric vehicle chargers to be super public before they're fixed. Thankfully, though, I can explain some details, as some known security flaws that remained unpatched were exploited, and a couple details on other exploited vulnerabilities were released. The Tesla wall connector charger was exploited once with a numeric range comparison without minimum check bug. That's a bit of a mouthful, but really what that means is the charger is checking for a value to make sure it's either less than or equal to a maximum target number. However, it doesn't verify if the value is greater than or equal to a minimum target number. Basically, the computer is checking for a valid input and assumes that the value it's checking for has to be a positive number. So it only checks the maximum value. The minimum value in this case, to check if it's a positive number, would obviously be 0. If the value is negative, but the code assumes it has to be positive, this can cause some rather unexpected errors. The value can be used for things like memory allocation and buffer access, which can lead to corruption of memory or a buffer overflow error. A buffer overflow is an error that occurs when a program writes data to a buffer beyond what that buffer can handle. A buffer is a region in memory made to store temporary data before it's processed, and, well, it can only handle so much data before that data has to go somewhere else because it's not being rewritten to other places fast enough. If the buffer is overflowed, the data can be written to different locations in memory that it's not supposed to be in. This can cause a lot of issues, from overwriting and corrupting data to executing code that can be used for further exploits. This is pretty common with buffer overflow attacks. Buffer overflow errors were also performed against the Autel Maxi Charger and the Phoenix Contact ChargeX. But for those particular bugs, an origin validation bug was also used, which is a bug in which the charger does not validate that the source of the data it's receiving is a valid source, basically allowing an attacker to access functionality that should not be available to them. Likely, it's not checking that it's connected with a car, so the attackers were able to look at data in the charger using another type of device. Or perhaps the source was from a strange, unknown network that shouldn't be able to talk to the charger at all. So, what exactly is the big deal about chargers being hacked? It does have some really interesting implications, and I actually see a lot of possibilities. you could potentially use the charger to read data from the electric vehicle itself, data you're not supposed to read. The charger is supposed to know things like battery status of the vehicle, but I could see a possibility for more data exposure, especially given people manage to do very interesting things with these chargers and expose data they already weren't supposed to see with them. If these chargers are at public charging stations, this could be especially dangerous, allowing hackers to potentially take a look at data from many different types of electric vehicles that stop to charge up. These chargers can see quite a few vehicles in a day, so it may be an interesting way to set up a local data farm. This particular area is pretty new and also very exciting to me, and although I do find it concerning, I'm really interested to see how these exploits have been used and what they really could do to a vehicle. Chargers are not something I really even considered could be hacked for electric vehicles, but if the charger has the capacity to read and transfer data rather than just supply power to a device, it absolutely can be hacked. Anything that is a computer can be hacked. They actually make phone chargers that can be programmed with malicious scripts, and although you're unlikely to run into one buying a cheap charger online or at a store, you should probably think twice before you grab a random abandoned charger on a seat you found at the airport. Thank you to Bleeping Computer and Security Week for information on the Pwn2Own automotive hacks, as well as the 0-Day Initiative for, well, more information on the Pwn2Own automotive hacks, but also for hosting this entire contest and allowing us to cover some really interesting information. And of course, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, and until next time, stay secure.